You are now tuning into the Some Salesforce Guy podcast. I am your host, Chris Hernandez, a Salesforce admin and developer whose main focus is the administration and development of K through 12 and university-based systems. And the episode you're about to listen to is focused on Salesforce in education. Sit back and enjoy. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Some Salesforce Guy podcast. I am your host, Chris Hernandez, and I'm really excited to kick this episode off because it's our first episode. Today, we're mainly just going to be touching on both my background as well as current trends in K through 12 and universities using Salesforce. Now, before we dive deep into Salesforce in education and even talking about any of the systems that we can set up, ways that universities and K through 12 schools are utilizing this robust system, I wanted to touch on what makes me qualified to even speak on this aspect. So now, I've worked in EdTech for around 8 years, 9 years at this point, and my early career was mainly focused on instructional design and educational technology. Pre-pandemic, my skill set mainly focused on teaching children with autism, game development, graphic design, and media-related education. I used to focus huge on media literacy, but as we were thrust into the pandemic years ago, there became a greater need to push our institution into the digital age. You see, I work for a very special private school in New York, who don't really like technology. So when the need to use technology during the pandemic arose, we were kind of at a loss. This is where I spearheaded moving us into the digital age. Believe it or not, because we're talking about back in 2020, our school was not on Office 365. We did not use any online systems other than email. Everything was mainly offline in Word, and the extent of our technology in-house was an in-house server that we self-hosted where we saved many of our things to. In the middle of the pandemic, I helped guide the way to creating an online space for us using Office 365, as well as utilizing things like Google Classrooms and Edmodo to set up online learning spaces. Now, post-pandemic, we faced an even larger issue. See, at the time, we were using a really outdated student information system called Rediker. Now, this is no shame to Rediker, but the biggest problem in the educational technology sector, or at least the biggest problem that I view, is that many systems that are sold to schools and institutions are not versatile enough to continue to grow or even cater to the basic needs of said institution. So with that being said, the system that we were using was more so catered to a more typical school or institution where things like grades and checked mark progress reports were tracked and focused on, whereas for my institution, which is a private special needs school that specializes in a DR floor time learning model, does not focus on grades or grade levels, etc., etc. I was tasked with something that seemed at the time a little impossible, which was finding a system that we can not only transfer all of our information into, but a system that would essentially grow with us over time, allowing us to streamline many of the processes that had sort of become redundant over time, like marketing, student enrollment, student re-registration, etc., etc. A pivotal moment here is backtracking a little bit. Pre-pandemic, my institution is privately held, and I had met with a former parent company where I had pitched Salesforce as an idea for us to move to. The idea was initially shut down. They had another software in mind that they were building themselves, which ultimately in the end failed, and they couldn't roll out to any other schools that they owned. Then again, fast forward back into the post-pandemic era. Now I was tasked with finding a new system, and I thought, why not look back into Salesforce? I know a few other private schools utilizing the nonprofit version of Salesforce, which I believe at the time was free for up to 5 members. And I thought it was maybe a really great way to kind of get a system that was immensely versatile and could grow. But my problem would be tackling the nonprofit portion of it, as it would be very different from utilizing a school platform. However, much to my surprise, I found out that Salesforce had just started rolling out something called Education Cloud with their K through 12 kit. After speaking to some of the folks over at Salesforce, things happened so quickly I didn't even look at any other systems. We dove straight into a contract with a partner company and started building out our Salesforce system. Now, this is something I'm going to retouch on later on when we're talking about trends in K through 12 and also in universities currently. Salesforce, the company, just sells the access to the platform itself. The ecosystem is very reliant on third-party companies or contractors that help get your systems set up for you to start utilizing. In the beginning, our contractors were great. They set up our student recruitment section which we utilize to obtain leads and then convert potential students into actual students. We have a fully custom built application center as well as registration and for later on re-registration, all within that Salesforce recruitment center. Then they slowly helped us build out a little bit of our K through 12 kit, or rather our student success hub, which is what we utilize for the post-recruitment process. That is mainly for students who are actively enrolled, students who have graduated, students who have left the school for other reasons, etc. Within that centralized hub, they helped us build a small therapy note center where therapists at the school would be able to write therapy notes. However, a story that's way too often and that's not talked about enough in the ecosphere here is that many contractors towards the end of their working relationship with a company start to trail off because there are many other clients that they either need to tend to, or there's just more clientele that they're trying to bring in. So you yourself really get lost in the sauce, because the way that these companies work, or these third-party contractors work, is that they have to keep bringing in a revolving door of clientele. Once they realized I was going to be the official Salesforce admin for our Salesforce instance, they kind of just fully trailed off of the project and kind of just left us to our own devices. This is where I had to double down and I had to kind of pick up where they left off. Not even kind of. I had to actually pick up where they left off and fully build out the rest of our system. So on the recruitment side of things, I had to fix many of the mistakes that were left behind inside of our custom-built application, as well as our registration that was built using the Communities module inside of Salesforce. Communities is this part of Salesforce that allows you to create sort of a community hub or a private website that end users can log into and view certain data that you allow them to use. Many other use cases of this is like a service center. If you're working in Salesforce Sales Cloud or Marketing Cloud, if you work for a social media company that is using Salesforce to track their clients, you might build a community hub for post-sales inside of Service Cloud so that people can log in and ask for requests and things like that and everything from your social media company or whatever kind of company that you're running. However, in this instance, we used the Community Hub to build an application registration and re-registration center. So post work with our contractors, I finished fixing our registration and our re-registration to sort of streamline it, as there were many problems with things like required text fields and uploading documents to attach to the registration. Then in post-application registration in our actual Student Success Hub, our contracting company had built a custom object for therapists to write therapy notes on every student object record, but they never actually catered it to every individual type of therapy. So this is where I was tasked with creating specialized therapy note custom objects within Salesforce for occupational therapists, physical therapists, music therapists, counselors, and even teachers for IEP notes, as well as classroom team meeting notes. This isn't where any of this stops as well, because where we currently stand, I'm still employed there as a Salesforce admin and Salesforce developer. And our next giant piece of the puzzle is using our Community Hub to build a parent center for parents to log in and view information about school happenings, school events, as well as see if they're up to date on their registration and applications, as well as building a community hub for alumni who have graduated, who want to be involved in alumni events, or just want to connect with other alumni or even other specialized programs. On top of this, we're building custom objects to track things like AAC devices, which is assistive tech such as iPads. We're building out things like student portfolios, which houses all student information, such as learning goals over time from their time with us, and also tracking attendance. There are so many other things that I would like to connect into the system, but we're sort of going off of this 5-year plan where every year we're trying to find ourselves in a place where we're meeting realistic goals within the Salesforce system to further help us track our student data. Among our future goals is including Salesforce Marketing Cloud so that we can better market to potential parents who would like to come visit the school or have their student enroll in the school, as well as implementing Service Cloud to better help parents who are struggling with utilizing the platform. Then beyond that is also adding staffing and HR to the system so that we can track things like staff education and certificates. There's also so many other things you can do, like integrating Salesforce into Office 365 as well as Google Drive, so that you can redirect users to different student files that you may be housing in other platforms as well. Because what's so special about Salesforce is that it breaks down the data silos that schools would normally have, right? So in most schools pre-pandemic, there were different solutions or different softwares that schools were using to track different types of data. But many times, none of these systems spoke to each other. What's fantastic about Salesforce is that it not only replaces many different systems, it also integrates into most of the common systems that we use today in schools and universities. But now enough about me. I want to touch on current trends in the education space. So Salesforce has really exploded onto the university scene. In the beginning, I really thought that K through 12 was going to make a big splash, but it does seem like K through 12 is kind of like this slow burn for them. Power Schools currently dominates most of the market, and it seems like, at least here in New York, Salesforce is winning over many of the private K through 12 schools. I know of a few private schools for neurodiverse students, as well as a few private schools for typical students who all utilize Salesforce in some aspect of their student information system or even their student marketing. Now in the university scene, since universities have such a large population of students and such diverse data, Salesforce really creates a centralized place for them to track and collect different things. Some of the stuff that I've seen in the university space is staff utilizing Salesforce to track alumni engagement, and that really has actually been a very large piece of Salesforce going into universities. Is a lot of universities are using it to engage with alumni, track alumni donations, track alumni events, outreach, all of that fun stuff. Now, from the last Salesforce education conference that I attended, I saw there were maybe 1 or 2 schools, or rather universities, that had around 2 to 5 year plans for replacing their current student information system with Salesforce and sort of finding a way to integrate kind of Blackboard into Salesforce so students would be utilizing the Salesforce system as well to see things like their coursework. I truly do think that Salesforce is going to dominate the education space for quite some time, mainly because A, they're such a large company, and B, they really do take security seriously. There are many systems like Power Schools that have seen many hacks over the year and student information being stolen from it. Salesforce does not play around when it comes to its data, and they have very strong security measures and features, from things like setting up your 2FA, which is just your base security layer, to setting up things like IP login ranges, and even timeframes for staff members or users to log in. So I'm kind of going to wrap up here. We're at the end for this episode. I just wanted to give a brief overview of myself and the things that K through 12 and universities were utilizing Salesforce for. Again, I'm really excited about this podcast. I hope many of you who are listening are excited about this podcast. Our next episode is going to be on student recruitment. So whether you're a university or K through 12 school, you should be tuning in to learn best practices for student recruitment, student engagement, or rather that pre-student engagement. And then moving on from there, we'll be talking about systems like custom applications, custom objects, things like that. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, any of those podcast listening apps, my main podcast is hosted on Substack, where I post a lot of blog posts in between episode recordings. I know this is going to be 2 episodes this week, but I'm kind of aiming for 1 episode a week. So if you're eager for more content, be sure to subscribe to my Substack so that you can see many of my blog posts that get released over the week. I've also had some people reach out with interest in advertising on the podcast. I'd really like to get maybe 1 month, a month and a half of episodes under my belt before I say okay to any advertisements or partnerships, but I'm really happy that a lot of people are excited about this. And if you tune into my Substack, I'm also going to be attaching my Buy Me a Coffee, where you don't have to exactly donate or buy me a coffee, but you can also submit questions. I want to make this as open as possible because at the end of each episode, I would like to do Q&As and wrap-ups of questions that maybe current developers, current administrators, or even future administrators and developers would love to ask. So be sure to actually head to my Substack so you can gain all those resources, you can ask questions, and you can interact with me. Now, you've been listening to the Some Salesforce Guy podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to our next episode.